everybody, and welcome to another Adobe Live here on Behance. I am joined today by Chantal Jahchan. Welcome, Chantal.
Hi, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you. And it's so good to have you on with us, all the way from New York as well, may I add. So it's so good you're up early, bright and early to join us here in the UK for our live stream. And everybody, we're going to be looking at typography today. This is the fifth session that we've done in our collaboration with Femme, and it's so great to be part of this because we've seen great things already from Racer, from Emily, Jasmine, Georgie, and of course you're here as well, Chantal, so this is great today. We're chatting in Behance, everybody, so please join us today. If you've got questions for Chantal on Chantal's process and any of the work that you see today, please get in touch. We're on behance.net/live. You might be watching on YouTube, but of course the chat stays in Behance. And then following our live stream, you can carry on the chat in Discord as well. And I'm kicking myself because I'm drinking out of my California mug today, and I should be drinking out of my New York City mug. So apologies, Chantal. How's it going in New York at the moment? How is it for you?
It's been good. It's early right now. I'm sort of watching the sun come up, which it's been ages since I've done that. But New York's been quiet. Still in quarantine, working from home, all of that. But yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, it's a tough time, right? It's definitely tough. And I think what's great about Adobe Live is that we've heard from a lot of our creatives about what they've been doing during lockdown and some of the creative ways that all of us have been spending our time really to stay creative and learn and things like that. And today, of course, we are getting into some typography. Tell us a little bit about your work and about what we're doing today.
Sure. So I have a little presentation I can share.
Go for it.
So as Maddy said, I'm Chantal Jahchan. I'm a Lebanese American graphic designer, and I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. Currently, I'm working at Pentagram, New York with Matt Willey, who's the newest partner. He came from the New York Times, where he used to do all those crazy covers for the New York Times magazine. And now he's sort of shifting into branding. And so that's been really great. That's been my quarantine project since March. We've been working together on a bunch of exciting things. And as far as my personal work goes, about 2 years ago, I graduated from university, and the thesis project that I did was sort of the beginning of my interest in Arabic type design. And so I'm by no means a type designer, but I like to look at these letters, and the way that I recreate them is sort of my own way of appreciating them. And so for my capstone, I sort of interviewed different people in Lebanon and took all these photos of vernacular signage everywhere on the road. And the project was really about looking at the typography of Lebanon and thinking about how it reflects our history after the Civil War. There are a lot of different cultures and languages in Lebanon, and just looking at the unity. Of course, this was 2 years ago, and now peaceful coexistence is not really the case. There's a lot of unrest and all of that, but we'll get to that in a little bit. And so most recently, after the August 4th explosion, I created this t-shirt that's sort of like this graphic of the Latin and Arabic words for Beirut coming together. And it was just sort of a quick exercise in, weaving the letters together and hand drawing the Arabic letters, mimicking like a hand brush calligraphy. And I sold that on Everpress, which the response to that has been incredible. So many people have reached out, asked about family, and we sold just about 1,000 shirts. I'm still waiting on the final numbers from Everpress, but it's somewhere in the ballpark of 15 to 20,000 raised for the Lebanese Red Cross and Impact Lebanon. So that's been, a
Wow.
crazy thing. so many people have been so generous and kind and sharing it and everything. So that campaign is over now. And we're doing a campaign today for a sticker to raise money for Studio Safar. This is their work. They're a graphic design studio based in Beirut. They're in this neighborhood called Jamaise, which is like, the best way I can describe it is like, it's like the Brooklyn of Beirut. It's kind of like an artsy scene. It's like younger people, bars, bookstores, all of that kind of thing. And so it's really close to the port. So it was hit pretty hard. And so that's where the studio is. And I mean, you can see here, they, even before knowing this was the brief, they've just been one of my favorite design studios because their work is in English and Arabic and French sometimes too. And they're just, the work they do is so great. And usually for good causes or like uplifting artists. Like they have this magazine you can see on the bottom left, that's their own publication, and they just uplift artists from the region, and they tell stories, and it's just like the type of thing that we need more of in Beirut. So it's really devastating that their studio space was destroyed. So this is their studio space, and today I'll be creating a sticker to raise funds for them to rebuild their space, and also just deal with all the implications of the blast that just totally destroyed their creative space.
It's so good that you can help in this way, you know, and create something that can be such a big impact on other people as well, you know, because everyone does want to help. And so it's good when you have impactful design and people see it and they say, yeah, okay, we'll support, we'll jump in. And, you know, like there's some comments that have come in. Angus have said that your en route project is so good. Steve says, nice displays. And Kirsty says, wow, amazing lettering. So, yeah, it's so good already to see. Yeah, people have seen your work.
Great. And so I just have, for people who aren't super familiar, I just pulled this map from the New York Times just to sort of like give a little explanation of like just the areas that were affected, and it also has to do with the graphic that I'll create. So in yellow there is the site of the explosion. For people who don't know, there was storage of ammonium nitrate, which is usually used for fertilizer, but it's also extremely flammable and explosive. And there was some incident that led to this storage being lit on fire, and that caused this giant explosion. And so the protests today are actually about the negligence of the government that led to that, because people knew it was being stored there. Residential areas are so close by, and yet like for 6 or 7 years, nothing was done about it. So that's kind of like the core of the tragedy. And so today I'll be focusing on 4 words that I'll sort of be sketching out. The first one is Beirut, of course. The second is El Marfa'a, which means the port, and that's obviously the location that the incident happened. And then these 2 neighborhoods that are both like the creative hubs of Beirut that suffered a lot of damage. So Jamaise, where Studio Safar is, and Marmakhail, which is also a similar area with studios. And then just a little background on Arabic type. I mean, there's so much here, but I'm just going to talk about the specific influence that affected what I'm going to be doing today. And so this is an example of one of the oldest types of Arabic script that's called Kufi. It's really geometric. You can see like bold lines and tiny counter spaces. And it used to be used originally to transfer Quran verses, but after that original application, they started using a square version of the Kufi script to do like mosaics and like different tile work. And so it evolved into this art form in itself where letters were the art. And a lot of that comes from, in Islam, you're not allowed to recreate life forms because it's like encroaching on like God and God's power. And so that has sort of survived and caused letters to be the art form. So you can't create animals or people, and so you create patterns and letters, and that is the art. So all that energy is going into typography.
Wow. I had no idea. That's so good.
Yeah, so this is sort of where I'll be starting from today. And I'm going to pull up Illustrator. So I've set up a little grid here. My goal today is to sort of make 4 different quadrants of type compositions and then put them all together at the end. So they'll mimic kind of like tiles coming together. So I've started with this first tile, and the first word I'm going to do is Beirut. I went back and forth trying to decide if I wanted to include Arabic in this or not. It was either the word for the port, which is Al Marfa'a, or the Arabic word for Beirut. I'm still kind of like, I'm not decided. I think both could work, but I'm just going to start with Beirut because that's the one I know.
That's good to see. And do you always start your project straight away in Illustrator, or do you begin with a sketch, or is it mostly in your mind and you just know you just go straight in?
It depends on the project. I think because this one is so grid-based and geometric, and my notebook is just plain old paper, it didn't make too much sense to start there. So I tend to get too excited and I just jump right into the computer. I wish I could say I sat there sketching with a cup of coffee, but I'm just like, I go right in.
Oh, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Okay. So the nice thing about this grid is that, ooh, I'm selected on a pattern. The nice thing about this grid is that it's modular, so you can sort of create letter forms and then move them around and stretch them and still follow the grid. And so that will help me sort of create a composition where things can be adjusted to fit together like puzzle pieces. And so that'll be a big part of this, is trying to figure out how to design this in a way that will fit together nicely and fill this square. Because that's kind of, it's like a puzzle, it's kind of the basis of Kufi.
Yeah. And where do you start with the grid? Is there a simple way to bring up a grid in Illustrator that you could share from the start, or is there something that you made?
There is a grid tool, but I actually use, my sidebar is missing. There we go. So I actually just put it on a different layer. I think you can use the grid tool and adjust it, which is in preferences, and you can snap to grid, and it makes a lot of logical sense, but this is the way I've decided to go. And it's just a hidden layer, and I have my smart guides on, so when I start drawing, things kind of, you can see the guides and things kind of snap into place. Mm-hmm. The main reason I drew it myself was to get these negative spaces, which are going to be like kind of the counter spaces in the letter forms and then also in between the letters. So I'm sure I could have done a grid where like the counter space was one square and the grid was like another square, but here I am.
No, there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's good to see how everyone works. I think this is, the beauty of watching other creatives work.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, now I'm going to start going on the E, and I'm just kind of trying to make everything fit together, and we'll see what needs to be adjusted. And I also, the nice thing about this grid is that I'm kind of sticking with a double grid for the thicker strokes, and then I'm introducing some contrast with one of the square grids. And so there are going to be narrow parts of the letters, and that'll just kind of create some visual interest.
Cool. And you said that, so you've been at university in New York. Where was it that you studied?
It was actually in St. Louis. So I'm originally from New York, but the university is called Washington University in St. Louis. It's a mouthful. So I went there for 4 years and I finished 2 years ago. But that project sort of just keeps coming up in conversation. And last summer I presented about it at Typographics, which has sort of just revived it. So it's not going away.
Everyone wants to hear about it.
Yeah.
It's good to see that this in a grid like this. I've never seen it done this way, so it's really good to see a new technique, you know?
Yeah, and one of the main reasons I decided to go with this Kufi-inspired grid is because I'm not a calligrapher and I'm not a type designer, and so this sort of, the rigidity of the grid lets me have like a thing to base letters on, and I don't have to worry about curves or any of that. Mm-hmm. I may end up towards the end sort of softening a lot of these edges, but we'll see if we have time for that. And then certain letters are just a lot harder to make work on this grid. When I was sketching this, you know, the R was kind of problematic. It just has so many different angles packed into a tiny space. So.
And do you use a similar process when you're writing in Arabic? Because there's a lot more curves and a lot more.
So typically, yeah, there are a lot more curves, but in this Kufi style, it's sort of like, because it's meant to be ornamental, it's not specifically meant to be legible. Like, they put the beauty of it as a priority over the legibility. And so that's why the square is fine for it. It's not natural to the Arabic script, and it's definitely not like the purest form, but it is like this, you know, decorational thing that it's okay if it doesn't look exactly like the script letters.
Cool.
The one bad thing about using a grid that you made is that you can't turn on the snap to grid feature, which if you had built the grid, there's like this, if you go to view snap to grid, then everything you move will just snap into place. I really should use it.
It's all good. Everyone has a different way. And I think what was great actually about the other sessions that we did in our collaboration with Femme was that we saw typography through so many different ways, whether it was drawn in fresco with Jasmine, or whether it was in, I think it was After Effects with Georgie. She had a lot of types moving across the page. And, yeah, so it's good to see, you know, so many different techniques, so different ways.
Yeah, my favorite part about watching people work is just seeing the shortcuts they use. I mean, of course, that only works in person, and you're like, whoa, how'd you do that so fast? Yeah. But it's definitely a fast way of learning just by watching other people do it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's mad, isn't it, actually, that you realize the long way round you've been going sometimes to get something done. And you think, oh, no, I should have known this. I should have, you know, but hey, I think everyone picks up and learns it through different means, like whether it's YouTube, whether it's Adobe Live, whether it's a course, right, or uni.
Definitely.
But yeah, it is watching other creators that help you pick up the shortcuts and the tips. That's looking good.
Yeah, so just kind of, now these letters can be stretched. And then the negative space sort of like takes on its own form, like you see these lines going through. And I think I'm gonna have to do something so that it looks less gritty, not gritty, but just something to soften it up. But I think I'm going to go ahead and do the other 3 compositions and then think about how to put them all together and make them look less like a grid that got colored in.
Here's a question for you from Kirsty, who says, do you use Adobe Fresco to draw?
I don't, but I watched, I think it was Jasmine who used it. I watched her session before coming on, and I thought every time I see someone drawing on an iPad, I want an iPad, even though I don't even do hand lettering, but it looks like a lot of fun. I don't use it, but it looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it definitely got me inspired actually after Jasmine was on. I'm on that fresco every evening. It's like my, when everyone has something that's their mindfulness type activity, that's totally mine. Fresco, drawing, watching Coronation Street, which is the soap over here. Yeah.
Oh, I haven't heard of it. In my case, I would probably just buy the iPad and then it would sit there, or I would play like some kind of game on it that's not productive. So the next word I'm going to do is Marmachial, which translates to Saint Michael. And there are a lot of streets there that are named after saints, and this is just one of them. The M is a bit tricky. Certain letters translate so much better to this straight up and down grid, and because the M has diagonals, it ends up taking up a lot of space when you try to do it this way. That's not quite right. So something like that probably reads pretty well. The sun is you can probably see it behind me. It's slowly coming up.
It is. It's in the UK at the moment. We've had some gorgeous weather recently, and then it's been really, I don't know, it was almost like a storm. It's all blustery, really windy. I don't know about everybody else in the chat. I saw a little bit of chat about the weather earlier. But yeah.
We had that yesterday.
Did you?
Yeah, just like it was sunny, it was fine, and then all of a sudden this flash storm and the sky got dark. It was surreal. So I've just done the two M's because I know they're going to repeat. I should probably go in order, so I'm going to go for the A.
So this would be quite good. I was just thinking about getting a grid. We've got a ruler in fresco now. I was just thinking I could make a grid and then I could draw on that in a similar way to what you're doing now for another. It's good, isn't it? Because it sparks your creativity, sparks your mind. And you think, I could do that.
Yeah, it's like a problem-solving approach as opposed to a blank canvas, which is definitely the easier for me to approach than just like, here's a piece of paper. So this is like one type of A that I could do. I think I could also probably just do a single story A. But I think that's a little more difficult to read. So I might just stick with the double story.
Yeah, the double story works. I think that with it lower, it looked like a Q a little bit.
Yeah, and then it creates this like, a lot of this is like, you don't want to have a letter that creates a weird negative space that you'll have to fill with another letter. So like the T here is a weird one. Like you just have to get it to like curl up on itself to fill that space. Otherwise you end up with a gap. So that's just something that I'm also solving for.
So is that your big no-no then? If you were to say, to somebody else to take on your approach, would it be just avoid that negative space?
Yeah, it's all about getting the letters to fill in all together and not have any gaps. And that's what creates the interesting space with the negative space that ends up looking like lines. And if you had gaps, you wouldn't really get that as much.
Yeah. So these are going to be a selection of stickers, did you say? All of these? Or are they all forming one?
I think we are still have not decided yet whether it's going to be like a grid of 4 on one sticker or just maybe some part of it will be a sticker. So maybe I mean, we could ask the chat what people think they would want once it's finished.
Let us know, everybody. And we're nearly halfway actually through our live session. The time is flying. It feels like we've been on for 5 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Hasn't it, right? So we're nearly halfway. So any questions for Chantal, get them into the chat on behance.net/live. Some of the words are a lot longer. And I imagine this could be quite difficult.
Yeah, I think this one and Jamaica are the the two longer ones. It surprisingly works. I think what's going to happen is Beirut's just going to look a lot bigger, which actually might be a good thing because that's sort of the all-encompassing term that these all relate to.
Do you use any other Adobe products, any one of our apps?
Yeah, I think the one I use most is probably InDesign for like book layouts and print, and then occasionally Photoshop. Like I considered maybe I would bring this into Photoshop just to maybe add some effects, maybe some noise, but I don't think I'll be doing that today. I think this one will work flat, sort of like how those tiles are flat color.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say I'm probably most comfortable in Illustrator. It was the first one I learned, and then, it's stuck.
It's the only one for me that I haven't got really into yet. I love it, and I love watching people, and I've made so many notes. But yeah, Illustrator is, I'm more Photoshop, After Effects, Premiere Pro.
Yeah, I learned After Effects towards the end of my university time. It was the type of thing we learned where like you had to teach it to yourself, which is fine. That's the way I learned. But I always feel like I'm not doing things the right way. That's how I feel when I'm coding too. Is like there's got to be a more efficient way to do this that I haven't come across.
Wow. Yeah, I haven't even started on coding. No. So what's your inspiration for when you work? I mean, you shared some images earlier on about Arabic posters and that beauty of the patterns. But yeah, what inspires you?
I think it varies from project to project. I like looking at archives and looking at research, and so I try to have the inspiration sort of be related in some way to the content, and not like an arbitrary thing. I think to each his own, and that's a very valid approach, but I'm a pretty literal person, and so I like things to connect in a certain way. So I'll dig through archives that are related to the thing that I'm doing, and I'll find some inspiration there to pull and extract and sort of make it my own. So that's the second word.
There's a question for you from Georgie in the chat.
Sure.
Who says, do you ever create animated type? I could see this typography in a grid working well as a squash and stretch motion, like the movement of the city from the explosion.
That would be so cool. I think technically I'm maybe capable of doing that. Maybe I should try that. That's a good idea. I think the one thing I haven't gotten down yet in After Effects is like I know how to import something from Illustrator, but I haven't yet played with shapes inside After Effects. Like if I wanted to stretch these letters, they would have to be like shapes or like points, and that kind of scares me. It just feels less precise than Illustrator to me.
Steve says that's looking great.
Oh, thanks.
He loves this. Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe I'll just skip the Arabic one and have these all in Latin. Maybe they'll look better as a set that way instead of one outlier. So I'm going to go ahead and start the next one. And a lot of these have repeating letters, so to sort of make the process go faster, I'll just steal one from over here.
Wow, that's good. Nice. And so, you know, you mentioned that you're doing a lot of work at the moment, and are you finding a lot of time during quarantine to get creative yourself and work on your own personal projects? Or
I did in the beginning. There was sort of this period between like March and like May or June where things were still picking up at work, because Matt's actually pretty new to Pentagram. He started in January. So during that time, the day job was a little bit slower, and I was seeking out projects that I could work on just, you know, for fun and also just as a side gig. But more recently, all the projects have sort of picked up, it seems, in the last couple of weeks, because they all started at the same time. They're also all like in the same design phases at the same time. So it's been a crazy couple of weeks, and I'm moving on Saturday. So my life is a mess right now.
Wow. Which part? You're in Brooklyn right now, right? In New York?
Yeah, I live in Williamsburg, and I'm moving to Clinton Hill. So just like a 10-minute drive south to a quieter, calmer neighborhood. Not that Williamsburg is crazy. It's just less quaint.
Yeah. No, I certainly know craziness. As I was showing photos before we went live, I've just got a new puppy called Elvis. Elvis, nothing but a hound dog. Elvis the Beagle, who is, it's like having a baby all over again. It's that right.
So he's a puppy?
He is 9 weeks old.
Oh.
I know.
You have to take a lot of pictures because
totally.
So fast.
Totally. Yeah. My next thing is to draw him in fresco. That's my next project. If he sits still, well, I need to take a photo, of course, but no point trying to draw him and sit still. He doesn't stay still. But yeah.
Can't wait to see that.
Hey, Redske has asked a question for you, who says, what are the measurements of your artboard?
The measurements of my artboard right now are 520 by 520. And that's because they're going to be stacked to create a 1080 grid. So maybe they're 540 actually. I can double check that.
I guess makes a good point. The images remind them of QR codes. Yes, that is exactly, they do.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah, and so hopefully with the rounding that I'll do at the end, they'll sort of take on a more organic look, because it's nice to build on a grid and all, but if people can just tell right away, like, oh, this was like fill in the boxes, I think it's a little less visually appealing. So we'll try to mask it a little bit.
How long would you typically spend working on a project like this?
It depends. Sometimes you try 100 things and the 100th one works, and sometimes you're trying something and the first or second idea works. So for me, there's not really a rhyme or reason for how long things take. Either it happens or it doesn't, and it takes a while to get to. But for this one, if I had a clear mission and I knew the layout I was going to do, maybe a few hours to actually do it, and then you can tack on like 4 hours of changing the colors, changing my mind, and just being indecisive about what it is I want to show.
Yeah. Steve says, I'm reminded of the hand lettering that was common in 70s movie posters.
Interesting.
I actually just, it looked like the game Grand Theft Auto. It looked a little bit like that, some of the lettering on this as well. So yeah, it's a good technique. As I said, I've never seen it like this before. So yeah, it's good to see.
So this word has an apostrophe in it. It's F-A apostrophe A, so it's kind of an odd one to do. And you sort of run into the problem of filling the space. You know, the A kind of could be an apostrophe if it were flipped. And if I take out the counter space. With some imagination, that can be an apostrophe.
Oh, yeah. Do you often work in black and white, or are you keen to add splashes of color? Or I mean, how do you normally choose?
I usually work in black and white first, just because if something can work in black and white, it always can work in color. So I sort of get that down, and it's easier to see the contrast in black and white, and then I start to play with color. I'm not very good with color, and I know that it's partially because I don't care for color very much. Like, I could be happy with just black and white everything. So I struggle a little bit with that part. I kind of wait till the end and then try 100 different things. And actually, sometimes that's what I use Photoshop for. I'll pull a piece of design into there and I'll play with like gradient maps and the different colors, and like sometimes we'll accidentally find something I like, but it's very rarely that I intentionally make something and don't regret the color choice.
Yeah. Looking good.
Yeah. And then,
that was quite quick, actually. Three artboards.
Yeah.
So Kiara asks, I'm completely new to Illustrator. How do you apply this grid of squares to the canvas? Did you build it from scratch?
So I did build it from scratch. There's a quick way to sort of make sure that everything is evenly spaced. So I'll just do a quick little demo, but you could either sort of create all these different grids and then use the align tool to equally space them out, and then do the same for the verticals. Or you can just hold two squares like that on either side of your artboard and then use the blend tool. And you can go in there and choose the number of steps that you want. So it'll sort of bridge the gap between the two shapes. And so here you can pick. And this is mostly for the way that I'm using this grid, which is wanting the negative space to be really tiny. But if you're just doing a straight up grid, I would definitely recommend just going into your preferences and setting the grid this way. You can choose all these settings and then do Command and the quote. I'm sure there's a view grid button. But yeah, and then you can snap to grid. So that way makes more sense if you're not wanting these little negative spaces.
Catherine asks, do you convert these to guides?
I didn't know you could do that.
No,
I guess I could do it by hand by dragging guides, but this is my quick and easy way. You know, I always think about these sort of things after the project is done, like, oh, you know, I guess it would have been much faster to do it through the Illustrator grid, and then I won't have these moments where I go back and look at it and realize something is like slightly off, but I guess that gives it character. So it's totally fine. So we're doing the final word here.
And I haven't seen any comments yet from everybody to say whether Chantal should put all four together or keep them separate. Is there any preference from everybody?
I think maybe they'll wait to see it all together and then decide.
Yeah.
Sort of. Not sure. I guess it depends on the size of the sticker. because you would want to be able to read all the words, and so if it's smaller, maybe you don't want the 4 up.
Kirsty says, all 4 together, please. What made you decide to go with stickers, by the way? I know that your T-shirt was really successful, and that you saw
It was actually Femme Type's idea. I think they know someone who does sticker production and was willing to do it. I think just to help them sell them at a low price, and so they could donate a decent amount of profits. So I think that was the reason they chose stickers. Femme Type sells bunch of little things on their site. They have like pins and things of that nature. So I think probably the sticker was just an exciting new surface to play with.
Yeah, they're popular. My laptop's covered in them. Do you love a sticker? Especially Adobe Max. There's always loads of stickers around the place. You can get products or different things. So,
yeah. My old laptop was covered, like you couldn't even see the computer, and it died while I was in school, so I lost all that hard work.
No. Sandrine says, I can really see that style in stencils. That's so true. I can see that in stencil.
It would probably work very well in stencil. Would probably need like more cuts, like cutting letters in half and things like that, but could be an interesting approach. I'm just going to steal an M from somewhere else. There's a double M in this word. I think we had another one. I kind of like the look of the stacking M's. I might do that again just to create like a little bit of repetition. I think what's nice about these is that the letters do end up looking different because you have to squeeze a different amount of letters in, but I think to have some sort of basic structure that you then like stretch and rearrange is nice.
Yeah. And then I know you're not going to add one of these in Arabic, but were you going to kind of weave that through like you did with the T-shirt design? Or would it have been its own artboard?
I think I've been doing that weaving thing kind of a lot lately, so I was going to forego that and just have the Arabic be one of the tiles. If we have time, I might still do it just to see how it looks, but I think maybe it would just look more cohesive. If my fear was that if I did Arabic, people would see it among the English and think like you're supposed to be able to read it because you know they look so similar. Maybe that's why it's cool. I don't know.
That is. I think with Arabic you've got a lot of straight lines, across the bottom, and then other curves. So it's easy to weave right in. It's a good technique. Lucas says, this is amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. I think also these are foreign words already to people who are not familiar with Beirut. So just trying to keep the confusion to a minimum. But yeah, if you ever visit Beirut, obviously not now, but in the future, you should definitely check out Jahchan and these areas where there are lots of little boutiques and galleries, and it is truly just like Brooklyn.
Yeah, you said it was like Brooklyn. Really arty, lots of studios and. Catherine says, lovely work.
Thank you. Still have to fit a Z and an E, So I may squeeze these guys up.
So you mentioned earlier on that you do a lot of graphic design and that you don't just specialize in typography, you do other projects and things like that as well. What kind of other things are you working on?
So one project I did that was sort of one of my favorite personal projects that I've done this year. I guess it's not personal, it's freelance work, but I reached out to this photographer named Farah Al-Qasimi, and she does this sort of amazing, surreal photography. And I noticed that her portfolio website was sort of like not up to date with her recent projects and kind of like, you know, like a straightforward Squarespace template. And so I reached out to her and said, you know, I love your work. Would you want to collaborate on building a new site that sort of like showcases your work in a more like unique way? And so we did that, and I built it through Cargo, which is, it's similar to Squarespace, but I think it's built by designers. So it's a little bit more customizable, and they have better built-in typography and all of that stuff. So we did it through there, and I loved the way it came out, and I thought it was really great to work with her because it's not very often that I get to work with other Middle Eastern American women. And so it was a project that it was cool we're sort of like in some ways peers, and we, you know, she has a lot of people who like follow her work, and she's in exhibitions all over the place. And so it's a good thing for both of us. It's sort of equally beneficial.
That's good.
So here are the 4 squares, and I think I'm gonna go ahead and stack them, and then maybe I'm just gonna duplicate them.
So are you going to put all four together? Or
Yeah, I'm gonna do sort of like, I guess, another grid, but just kind of stacking them to make a square, because I think one of the goals was to just have this be an Instagram graphic that Femme Type will post, and you know, people can share. So that's kind of the main goal, and then maybe one of these little squares will be the sticker. So I'm just making sure that the space between the squares is the same as the negative space inside them, so they kind of start to bleed together. I think I might use color to separate them a little bit, because I still want them to be legible. Maybe not immediately, but at some point.
nice.
So there it is. I'm going to start with Beirut and just sort of turn these into single shapes. And then,
Did you say you're going to soften them slightly, did you say? Or is that something that's not for this one?
So one tool that I just like, I can't keep my hands off this tool in Illustrator. I don't know why. I love to round corners. So for here, usually when you round corners, it sort of stops you at the point where the smallest corner has been rounded and you can't go any further there. So if I actually just select the corners that I do want to round, you can do them individually. So that's it.
Oh, I'm muted for a second there. I was just saying that Kirsty says looking good. Sandrine says really, really good. Angus says loving this. Steve says sweet on the round corners. So yeah.
This series of compliments in my head as I worked all the time.
It's always hard when you're working that people are watching you. I always find it so hard typing, and you've got someone over your shoulder.
It's also hard to speak while working.
Yeah. Oh yes, I'm throwing things at you all the time here. Sorry.
Sorry. That's the whole point. Just kind of going in. I think already this is helping everything feel more organic, at least a little bit.
It looks great.
I'll sort of notice every time there's a point here, it's kind of like this is where things were joined when I did the Pathfinder tool. And occasionally I'll just have to like realign something or readjust these corners. I'm kind of sticking with the same corner radius throughout, which is I'm doing 24. And then these smaller ones, I think the maximum they'll kind of go in terms of radius is I think like 4 points. So just trying to keep that consistent across the board.
Yeah, it looks really good with the rounded edges. Really good. And oh yeah, Kirsty's made a good point, everybody. Don't forget that we have Discord, so you can keep on chatting between streams. So yeah, get your sharing your work in there. And Chantal, you'll be sharing this on Instagram after, right? So I think everyone can access it.
I will be posting it, and I think Femme will be posting it as well. So yeah, look out for it. I might make some off-screen adjustments, as I usually second guess whatever it is that it looks like at the end, but it should look mostly similar.
No, it's looking good. And you said that you might separate kind of parts of it with color. Do you think that that would be kind of more in the background, or you think that it would be maybe per artboard?
Yeah, I think maybe I would do like the ones that are next to each other wouldn't be the same color. So I actually had a little color palette there. I thought I would do a red color, just like something really bright. And so I thought Beirut would be red, and then maybe Jamaica would be red. Maybe these guys would. Black and red is sort of intense, so maybe I would either pick a different color or white with a different color background. So many options.
Diksha says, typeface look good now with the round corners, loving it.
I think it takes on a much less serious look. Kind of looks more fun and quirky.
And do you work with other types? Like, do you go into, font tools or like typeface and select lots of different options, or do you prefer to make your own type like this and round the edges yourself and mold it, make it yourself, build it yourself?
I have tried to use one type design program. It's called Glyphs. I think it's meant for, or at least Glyphs Mini is meant for like beginners. But I'm just so used to Illustrator, it's like second nature that at this point to learn a new software, it requires a lot of time, which I currently don't have too much of. But it's definitely something I do want to learn. And I've considered going back and taking classes for type design. Like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but the Cooper Union, which is an art school in New York City, they offer this like program in type design, and it's sort of like they have two different programs, like a condensed program and a extended program. So it's either 5 weeks or like a whole year, and you can go and learn type from professionals in the field. So it's been something that I've wanted to do, but I just kind of never actually did.
Yeah, time is so hard. I think one of the best bits of advice that I once received was you've got to slow down to speed up. Sometimes, just to take time out completely, learn something, and then you can excel. So yeah, it's finding the time. Well, we have about 5 minutes left now. The time has flown.
Oh, no.
It really has.
I might be able to pull this off. Let's see.
Don't worry. I mean, if you don't, you can always share it afterwards, of course, you know. I'm sure that you'll get a lot of followers on Instagram for this, and same with FemTech as well.
Yeah, I think at least I'll finish rounding this one, and I'll start getting the color in there just to see what it'll look like. And here I can just steal this A.
Nice shortcut.
Yeah. That one's done.
Stephanie says the rounded corners really make it easier to read. It's going to look amazing.
Hope so.
Well, it's the first time that I've ever seen design like this in Illustrator with, using a grid. And it was good to see you actually set up the grid, actually, to look at how you did it, so that we can see, how to use this process and use this approach as well. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. I think it's definitely an easy way to get into this type of thing without having like perfect skills in, curves and hand lettering and contrast and things like that. It's sort of a beginner way to make things look good, I think.
So you're working on the project for that portfolio that you said that you're assisting with one of your peers. Anything else on the horizon that is exciting that you're looking forward to? Apart from the move, moving house, of course.
That's been crazy, but I think Matt, we're working on a project. We're working on many projects that I can't talk about. Literary magazine that Matt, my boss, and his friend Dan Willie are starting, and so they recently did a Kickstarter campaign for it, and it's sort of like this time capsule like magazine where they're releasing one issue a year for 10 years, and so each issue is a collection of writing from like all these amazing contributors from 2021 to 2030, and so that's going to be something that I'll be working on for as long as I'm working with him. And so we're just sort of in the beginning stages of that. So I helped build that website in yet another, web building platform, which is called ReadyMag. They're all like pretty similar, but the thing that makes ReadyMag different is this ability to like stack pages. So instead of having a traditional menu, pages just follow each other like a long scroll. So for certain projects, like a landing page for a magazine, for example, I think it works pretty well.
Nice. Cool. Well, there's 2 minutes to go. If anybody has any last questions for Chantal at all, definitely get them in the chat for Chantal before we go today. And definitely go on to Instagram, have a look at FemType, and have a look at Chantal's Instagram page so you can see the final page, the final artboard of today's activity.
So maybe I'll just skip rounding this for now, and I'll just show kind of like the color scheme I was thinking of. Lock this background. I think maybe doing a stroke here will make them look different enough.
That's cool.
It's kind of tough because I don't want it to look like cartoony.
Yeah. It's for a good cause you're doing this for today, so it's good to see. Sanjin says revert background, foreground.
What was that?
Revert background to foreground.
So make the background red and the rest.
Background red and the writing white on top. That's a good idea.
Could work. It might be a bit harder to read.
Sandria says, sorry, not giving orders, obviously. We're listening.
I'm just waiting for someone to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
It's my strong suit.
It's good to hear for people in the chat, you know, to say, right, let's try it. Let's mix it up.
Yeah, I'm open to any suggestions. I think one way to tie them together is sort of take these moments of like punctuation and make them match the other squares. Sadly, there's no such apostrophe or dot in Jamaica, but maybe I can find a way to squeeze one in there. But yeah, I would love to hear from people if they think we should do this kind of like all four together, or if one particular square would make a good sticker, or something else.
Well, everybody, the chat will continue in Discord, so get your opinions in there for Chantal. Thank you for joining us today. I can't believe that we're at time. Like, we've been an hour. It feels like 5 minutes.
Yeah,
it's so good. It's gone fast, hasn't it? And it's so good to see the design that we started with a really simple grid, and we ended up with, you know, this really great sticker design. It's for a great course, for everything going on in Lebanon as well. And yeah, it's been really good having you on. So thank you, Chantal.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's all good. And we're here all week, same time, everybody, midday till 1 p.m. So please make sure you join in, and we'll see you again tomorrow, same time. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.